AITA for cutting off my best friend after she publicly humiliated me at my birthday. So, a little backstory first. I, 28F, have a best friend, Rachel, 29F, who I've known since high school. We've been through everything together: college, breakups, career changes, and countless other ups and downs. We've always had this really close bond. I've always been there for her through thick and thin. I consider her more like a sister than just a friend. However, things recently took a huge turn, and now I'm questioning if I'm being unreasonable or if I really do have the right to be upset. I had a small birthday party last month. It was a casual get-together with a few close friends and family at a local restaurant. Nothing too extravagant, just dinner and drinks, and I was genuinely excited to spend the evening with people I care about. I've always been a low-key person when it comes to celebrations. I don't need any grand gestures, just good company and good food. Rachel, however, had been pressuring me for weeks leading up to the event to make it bigger and more memorable. She insisted that I let her help organize it, and after some back and forth, I finally agreed. Looking back, that was probably my first mistake. On the day of the party, everything seemed fine at first. I arrived at the restaurant, greeted my guests, and was excited to catch up with everyone. But about an hour into the evening, Rachel stood up to give a toast to me. I thought it was a sweet gesture, especially since she's always been the life of the party. She started off with some nice words, talking about how much our friendship meant to her, and then things took a sharp turn. Rachel began telling everyone the most embarrassing and personal details about me, things I've never shared with anyone outside of my inner circle. She talked about how I've struggled with anxiety in the past, mentioned an incident where I got laid off from a job a few years ago, and even shared an embarrassing story from when I was dealing with some personal issues in my relationship. She did all of this with a tone that was supposedly meant to be lighthearted, but it felt more like she was throwing me under the bus in front of everyone. The crowd was laughing, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that made me feel good. It was awkward, uncomfortable laughter. I'm sure most of my friends didn't know about these things, and now they did. And it wasn't like Rachel was trying to be sympathetic or kind. She was laughing along with the group, making me the butt of the joke. At the time, I was in complete shock. I felt my face turning red, and I could feel my heart racing. I don't handle situations like that very well, especially in front of a crowd. I tried to smile and brush it off, but it was hard. After the toast, I was in a pretty bad headspace. I went to the bathroom to collect myself, and when I came back, Rachel was acting like nothing had happened, continuing to socialize and have fun with the group. I, on the other hand, was trying my best to hold it together without crying or making a scene. Later that night, when most people had left, I finally confronted Rachel about what had happened. I asked her why she thought it was okay to humiliate me in front of my friends. Her response was something along the lines of, "I didn't think it was that big of a deal. You've always been open about that stuff, and everyone knows we're close." She also said something like, "You got to learn to laugh at yourself more." To say I was upset would be an understatement. I told her that she completely crossed the line and that it wasn't funny. I ended the conversation by telling her I didn't want to speak to her anymore. I needed space to process everything and figure out if our friendship could ever go back to normal after this. The next few days were a blur. I was hurt and confused, and I couldn't stop replaying the moment over and over in my head. I kept thinking, how could she do that to me? How could she share things that were so personal without even thinking about how I'd feel? I wasn't asking for her to protect me from the world, but I thought we had an unspoken agreement to have each other's backs, especially in front of others. Rachel texted me a few times after the party, apologizing and saying she didn't mean to hurt me. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like her apology wasn't sincere. If she truly understood why I was upset, she wouldn't have done it in the first place. It felt more like she was apologizing because she realized I was upset, not because she genuinely thought what she did was wrong. I didn't respond to her messages, and I blocked her on social media. She eventually called me and left a voicemail saying that I was overreacting and that we've always joked around like this before. But this wasn't a joke, and it wasn't like the other times. It felt like she crossed a boundary that I didn't know was even there until it was too late. It's been about a month since the party, and I've been reflecting on everything. I've told a few friends what happened, and most of them are on my side, saying that I have every right to be upset. A couple of people have said that Rachel probably didn't mean to hurt me, but that doesn't really help me feel better. I keep thinking about how I've always been there for her, and this is how she repays me. I keep wondering if I'm being too sensitive or if I'm right to feel this way. At this point, I'm leaning toward ending the friendship, but I still don't know if that's the right call. AITA for cutting her off after what happened. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and motivates me to create even more amazing content just for you. Make sure to turn on notifications so you'll never miss out on a new video. I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. It truly helps the channel grow. AITA for refusing to let my parents use my house for a family event after they trashed my last one. So I, 28F, have a pretty big family, and we're all relatively close. My parents are in their early 50s, and they like to host family events, but they've never been the best at respecting other people's property. I've lived in my own house for about 2 years now, and I've always tried to keep it in good condition. It's not a mansion, just a small but cozy 3-bedroom place, but it's mine and I take pride in keeping it nice. A few months ago, my parents asked me if they could host a family gathering at my place for my aunt's birthday. I said yes, but with the condition that everyone clean up after themselves and not leave a mess. My parents and a few other family members promised that they would be respectful of my space. I thought everything would go smoothly because it was supposed to be just a casual afternoon with cake, snacks, and a little catch-up. The event came and went, and honestly, I was left completely floored by how much my family trashed my house. I'm talking about spilled drinks on the carpet, crumbs everywhere, food stains on the couch, dishes left out for days, and a bunch of random stuff strewn across the floor. And that was just the physical mess. The emotional toll was much worse. My parents didn't help with cleanup at all. They just left and assumed that I would handle everything. I was completely overwhelmed. When I asked them for help, my mom acted like it was no big deal and said I should just relax because it was a family event. She even had the audacity to tell me I was being dramatic and that it wasn't like it was that bad. Meanwhile, my dad kept telling me to let it go because it was just a little mess. I spent an entire week cleaning up after the event. The stains on my carpet didn't come out easily. The couch still has some stains, and I had to replace a few things that got broken. I was exhausted, and to make it worse, my parents didn't even acknowledge how much work I put in to get everything back to normal. They never apologized. Fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, and my parent called me again, asking if they could host another family gathering at my house. This time it was for my younger brother's graduation, and they really wanted to have a big celebration to mark the occasion. They promised me that everything would be different, and they'd be more careful this time. I immediately said no. I told them I wasn't comfortable letting them host another event at my place because of how they treated it the last time. My parents were shocked. My mom especially got really upset and accused me of being selfish. She said that I was being unreasonable and that I shouldn't hold a grudge over a few minor stains. She claimed I was punishing everyone for what happened months ago. To be honest, I was still feeling the weight of the last time. I felt like my space was disrespected, and I honestly don't think I should have to go through that again. I know it's just a house, but it's my house, and I take care of it. I've been on my own for a while now, and I feel like I deserve some respect when it comes to how my property is treated. I explained that if they wanted to have the graduation party, they could host it at their house or rent a venue. I even offered to help them find a venue if it made it easier, but they'd have to do the work to arrange it. My mom kept pushing and said that it wouldn't be the same if we didn't have it at my place. She called me ungrateful for not supporting my brother and his achievement, and my dad chimed in, saying that I was making a huge deal out of nothing. My brother hasn't weighed in directly, but I know he feels awkward about the whole situation. I started feeling really guilty because I don't want to create drama or ruin the celebration, but I just can't get over how my house was treated before. I feel like I'd be setting myself up for more frustration if I let them do this again. My parents are not bad people, but they have a history of not taking responsibility when they make a mess, and it just makes me uneasy. I've also thought about renting a place for the party myself and offering to help with the costs, but I don't want to seem like I'm trying to buy my way out of the situation. I just don't want to deal with the stress of them possibly disrespecting my space again. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents use my house for another event after they trashed it last time. I feel like I'm being reasonable, but I'm starting to second-guess myself since they're making me feel like I'm being too harsh. AITA for not attending my friend's birthday after she demanded I pay for my meal. I, 26M, have a friend, Rachel, 25F, who I've known since college. We were pretty close for a while, but over the last couple of years, we've drifted a bit. We've both gotten busy with our lives, but we still try to stay in touch and hang out every once in a while. Rachel has always been a bit of a diva in my opinion. She has this tendency to expect a lot from people and can be a bit demanding without realizing it. It's not like I've never forgiven her for it, because I've always been the type of person to just let things slide, but lately, things have been getting under my skin. So, Rachel's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and she invited me to a restaurant for her birthday dinner. We've gone out for birthdays before, so I thought nothing of it and accepted the invite. It was a nice place, a little more on the expensive side, but I figured it was a special occasion, so I wasn't too worried about the cost. A couple of days before the dinner, Rachel sends out a message in our group chat with some details about the restaurant and the time. At the end of the message, she drops a little bombshell. She says, "Also, I know it's a birthday celebration and all, but just a heads up, I'll be asking everyone to pay for their own meals. I don't want anyone feeling uncomfortable if they can't afford to pitch in for a big meal or anything." At first, I thought it was kind of a joke, but after looking at the message again, I realized she was serious. Now, I'm all for being mindful of finances, but this rubbed me the wrong way. We've all been friends for years, and if she was celebrating her birthday, shouldn't it be on her to cover the cost, or at least offer? It's not like we were going to some casual fast food joint. This was a fancy restaurant where an average meal could easily cost upwards of $50, and that's not even including drinks. I was a little taken aback, but I figured I could roll with it, though I did feel like it was a little odd to put that kind of expectation out there. Rachel wasn't exactly poor. In fact, she's always at a pretty cushy job and can afford a nice lifestyle. So I felt like this was more about her being tight with her money than anything else. But whatever, I didn't want to make a big deal about it, so I just agreed to go. The day of the dinner arrives, and when I get to the restaurant, I notice Rachel is already sitting there, and she's got this big smile on her face. The rest of the group slowly trickles in, and we all start chatting. It's a fun vibe, and everyone's laughing, catching up. The server brings us menus, and I immediately notice that the prices are a lot higher than I had anticipated. I'm talking $60 for a main course, and the appetizers were at least $20 each. As we all start placing our orders, Rachel just goes ahead and orders the most expensive thing on the menu. No surprise there. I get that it's her birthday, but it just felt a little self-centered. I wasn't judging her for wanting to treat herself, but it did make me feel uncomfortable. I ordered a less expensive option, a burger and fries, just to keep my tab reasonable. The meal goes on, and everything seems fine until the check comes. The server hands it to Rachel, and she looks over it for a minute, then smiles and says, "All right, guys, let's all split the bill evenly. We'll just divide it by the number of people, and you can Venmo me your share." At first, I'm stunned. I was really hoping she would at least offer to pay for part of it, or at the very least cover the drinks or appetizers, since it was her birthday. But no, she was expecting everyone to pay for their entire meal. And not just that, but she also wanted us to pay for her $70 steak and a bottle of wine she ordered halfway through the meal. It felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't help it. I felt a little frustrated, so I quietly asked, "Rachel, are you sure you want to split it evenly? I didn't order the same things you did. I got a burger and fries, and you had the steak and the wine. Wouldn't it be fair if we paid for what we ordered individually?" She shot me a look and said, "Oh, don't be like that. It's not about the individual cost. It's just a birthday celebration, and I don't want anyone to feel like they can't contribute." I tried to keep my cool, but at that point, I was really annoyed. The group all looked at me, and they seemed to be thinking the same thing. Nobody wanted to say anything, though. I'm not sure if they were too awkward or just didn't want to be the one to call her out. I sat there for a few more minutes, debating whether to say anything else, but in the end, I just couldn't bring myself to go along with it. I told her, "Rachel, I'm really not comfortable with this. I'm happy to pitch in for my own meal, but I'm not paying for your steak and wine. I think it's a little unfair." Rachel looked completely shocked, and her smile quickly turned into a frown. What? You're not going to pay your share? She asked, looking like she was about to cry. It's my birthday, and I thought you'd be cool with helping me out. I can't believe you're being so petty about this. At that point, I had had enough. I stood up, told everyone I'd pay for my own meal, and then left the restaurant. As I walked out, I heard Rachel yelling at me, but I just ignored it. I was fuming, but also relieved to leave. I'm not one to start arguments, but this just felt like the last straw. The next day, I got a message from Rachel demanding an apology. She said I embarrassed her in front of everyone and made the situation awkward. I told her that I didn't think it was fair to expect people to pay for her expensive tastes, and that I felt like she was being selfish. She didn't take it well and accused me of ruining her birthday. Now, a few people in our friend group are saying that I should have just paid up to avoid causing drama. They said I was being petty and that I should have sucked it up since it was her birthday. I'm feeling conflicted because I do think I could have handled it better. But at the same time, I don't think it's right to expect people to cover your personal indulgences, especially when it's something as expensive as a birthday dinner. So, AITA for not attending my friend's birthday after she demanded I pay for my meal. AITA for kicking my brother out of my house after he borrowed my car without asking. So, a little backstory. I, 29F, have an older brother, 34M. Let's call him Jake. Growing up, Jake and I were pretty close, but over the last few years, we've had a lot of friction between us, mostly because Jake has always been irresponsible, and I've always been the one to pick up the pieces for him. To be fair, I know he's had some tough breaks in life, but I've always felt like he takes advantage of my generosity. I own a house, and it's just me living here. It's a cozy 2-bedroom place, and I'm very protective of it. I've worked hard to get to this point in my life, and have spent a lot of time making sure I've built up a space that feels like mine, especially after years of dealing with all the ups and downs of life and some trauma. Now, to the incident. A few weeks ago, Jake called me asking if he could borrow my car for a few days. He was in between jobs, and his car had broken down, and his current situation meant he couldn't afford to fix it right away. I knew the situation was rough for him, but I also knew Jake was the kind of person who would ask to borrow something and never give it back or take care of it. He's done this with my stuff before, used it, then returned it damaged or not at all. But this time, I decided to be nice and let him borrow my car for a few days. I told him I expected it to be back by Friday afternoon at the latest. I made it clear that I didn't want him using it longer than that because I had plans to use it myself the following weekend, and frankly, I didn't want to get into the cycle of him keeping my stuff for weeks or months at a time. Friday afternoon came and went, and Jake didn't bring the car back. By Saturday evening, I started texting him to check in, but he didn't respond. I wasn't too worried yet, since I knew he wasn't the most reliable with answering messages. But by Sunday, I was getting anxious, especially since I had some important errands planned. I called him. No answer. I called again, left a voicemail, still no response. I decided to drive over to his apartment to get the car myself. When I got there, Jake's car was parked in front of his place, but my car was nowhere to be found. I was getting really frustrated at this point. I knocked on his door, and when he finally opened it, I asked where my car was. He seemed surprised, like he genuinely didn't know why I was upset. He told me he had needed it a bit longer, but he had been meaning to call me to let me know, just forgot. He said he'd left it at a friend's house because it broke down, but he promised to bring it back in a few days. This is where I snapped. I was furious. I had been more than patient, and he couldn't even be bothered to give me a simple update on what was going on. I told him that I didn't care about his excuses, and that he needed to get it back to me immediately, or I would be taking matters into my own hands. He said I was overreacting and that I needed to relax, but at that point, I'd had enough. I told him I didn't want him near my house or my stuff anymore. I said he was irresponsible, and if he couldn't treat me or my belongings with respect, then I didn't want him in my life at all. He tried to argue, but I told him to leave. I said I wasn't dealing with this again and that I'd rather he just stayed away. Jake, looking hurt and confused, told me I was being dramatic and that he would get the car back to me soon. I told him that wasn't good enough anymore and I wanted him gone. I wasn't interested in hearing any more of his excuses. I honestly just wanted him out of my life for the time being. He left, but we've barely spoken since. Now, I feel kind of conflicted. Part of me feels like I did the right thing because I've been so accommodating to him in the past, and he has taken advantage of my generosity. I also know that I'm not wrong to be upset that he just took my car without asking and ignored my request to return it. However, another part of me feels guilty because I know that he's in a rough spot, and I could have been more understanding, maybe offered him help in other ways or set clearer boundaries with him in the first place. My friends are pretty divided on this. Some of them say I did the right thing, that I have every right to stand up for myself and protect my space. Others think I should have been more patient with him and try to find a middle ground. Some think I was too harsh and that I could have avoided all of this if I had communicated better from the start. So, AITA for kicking my brother out of my house after he borrowed my car without asking and kept it longer than agreed. AITA for confronting my sister about how she treats our parents. I, 29M, have an older sister, Olivia, 34F. We grew up in a household where my parents worked hard to provide for us, and while we never had extravagant things, we were always well taken care of. Our parents were incredibly supportive, and their main focus was always making sure we were happy and successful. Olivia, on the other hand, has never been as close to our parents. Ever since I can remember, she's had a strained relationship with them. She's always been extremely independent, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but she took it to the extreme. In her eyes, anything our parents did for us or tried to help us with was somehow suffocating or controlling. This created a huge divide between her and our parents. She didn't come to family gatherings unless she absolutely had to, and when she did, she would make comments about how behind the times our parents were or how they didn't understand the modern world. I, on the other hand, had a very different relationship with our parents. I was closer to them growing up, and as I got older, I appreciated everything they did for me even more. Sure, we had our disagreements, but I always tried to listen and understand where they were coming from. They had their flaws, but they genuinely cared for us and wanted the best for us. Over the years, Olivia's relationship with our parents has only deteriorated. She's become more distant, and when she does interact with them, it's almost always in a condescending way. She'll openly criticize them for not being more tech-savvy or complain that they're old-fashioned or too traditional when they do things she doesn't agree with. I've tried to intervene in a few situations, but Olivia always brushes me off, calling me mom's little helper or dad's favorite. A few months ago, our parents decided to retire and move to a smaller house in a quieter neighborhood. They worked hard for decades, and this was their time to enjoy some peace and rest. They wanted a smaller, more manageable house and were excited about the change. They told us about it one evening, and while I was genuinely happy for them, Olivia just scoffed at the idea. "That's such a waste of money," she said. "You should have invested that in something more useful, like a vacation home or something fun. You're just settling for the easy option." It didn't sit well with me. Our parents had worked their whole lives for that moment, and I couldn't believe Olivia was so dismissive of their happiness. But I didn't say anything at the time. I just let it go. Then, a couple of weeks ago, something happened that pushed me over the edge. I was at my parents' house when Olivia called. She was going on and on about how she was too busy to visit them, and that it was pointless anyway. Our parents had asked her to come over for dinner, something they do once a month, but Olivia had brushed them off yet again. She started criticizing their house move, calling it ridiculous, and saying they were acting like old people. I couldn't take it anymore. I got on the phone and confronted her. I told her that she needed to stop acting like they owed her something and that she needed to respect the life choices they were making. I said she was being rude, and I was tired of watching her constantly put them down. I also told her that if she didn't want to be involved in their lives, that was her choice, but she shouldn't keep pretending like it was their fault that they weren't keeping up with their standards. Olivia lost it. She started yelling at me about how I was just as bad as them, and that I was always trying to be the perfect child. She called me a puppet and said I was just trying to make up for the fact that I wasn't as successful as her. She told me I was enabling our parents' suffocating behavior, and that I was just too naive to see it. I tried to stay calm, but I was really upset. I told her that she was wrong, and that maybe, just maybe, it was time she grew up and realized that our parents were not perfect, but they loved us and tried their best. I ended the call after that. Since then, things have been really tense. Olivia hasn't spoken to me, and she's made it clear that she's still upset. She even sent a text to my parents saying that I was the one causing trouble between the family. My parents, being who they are, didn't want to get involved in the drama and just told me they loved me. I feel like I'm caught in the middle, and I honestly don't know what to do. I'm not expecting Olivia to suddenly become best friends with our parents, but I don't think it's too much to ask for her to treat them with respect. Am I the asshole for confronting her about how she treats them? I've been wondering if I overstepped, but at the same time, I don't feel like I was wrong. AITA for refusing to help my brother after he lied about me during a family argument. So a bit of background. I, 28M, have a brother, Jake, 25M, who has always been the type to avoid responsibility. We grew up in a pretty typical family, but our parents have always been pretty lenient with him, whereas I had to work a lot harder for things. I know this might sound like typical sibling rivalry, but there are some things that have happened that have really shaped our relationship and made me frustrated with him to the point where I'm now questioning if I'm the asshole in all this. A few months ago, Jake started working at a startup that he got through a connection, not through any particular skill or experience, and ever since then, he's been acting like he's living in a completely different reality. He started going on about how he's making all this money and how his company is going to change the world. Seriously, I can't even remember what they do. It sounds like vague tech stuff. He went from being the kind of person who struggled to pay rent to suddenly talking about buying new gadgets, designer clothes, and attending expensive parties. He's always been a bit of a show-off, but this was something new, and it rubbed me the wrong way. I was happy for him at first, genuinely. I mean, it was a big deal that he was making more money, and I thought maybe this was a turning point for him. Maybe he'd finally grow up and start taking life more seriously. But things started to go downhill when Jake began constantly comparing himself to me in ways that were just kind of annoying. He started making comments about how I should be as successful as him, even though I've been working in a stable job in IT for a few years. I've built a good career, but I'm not flashy about it. I don't post on social media about my salary or the occasional vacation I take, which is the kind of stuff Jake loves to brag about. One day, we had a family dinner at our parents' house, and of course, Jake was being his usual self. He kept talking about how much money he was making and how great everything was. I could feel myself getting irritated, but I didn't want to make a scene. At one point, he turned to me and asked, "So, are you ever going to catch up? Stop being the boring one in the family." I responded with something like, "I'm doing fine. Thanks," trying to keep it casual. That's when all started. Jake then started going off about how I'm just settling in my career, how I don't have the drive that he has, and how I'll never be as successful because I'm not willing to put in the effort like he is. It was honestly such a weird conversation, and I was getting pretty upset, but I kept my cool and didn't say anything. I could see my parents were kind of uncomfortable, but they didn't step in. It felt like they were letting Jake get away with this. Later that night, I talked to my mom privately. I mentioned how frustrating it was to have Jake constantly throwing his supposed success in my face and belittling my hard work. She told me I was being too sensitive and that I should be proud of Jake for making it big. She said I was just jealous of his success, which completely caught me off guard because that's not what was bothering me at all. I wasn't jealous. I just didn't like the way he was belittling me. A few days after that, things got worse. Jake posted a picture on Instagram, captioned something along the lines of "when you've worked hard and finally made it out of the struggle." He tagged me in the post, which I thought was kind of weird. But then the comments started flooding in, all congratulating him for finally proving that hard work pays off. He then added a comment about how my brother could never understand this grind, but I'm so proud of him anyway. Now, I need to give you some context here. A few years ago, Jake was really struggling to find a job. He had dropped out of college and had been bouncing from one low-paying job to another. It wasn't that he didn't try. He was just kind of directionless and always looking for the easy way out. In contrast, I worked hard to get into a good college and started working early, eventually finding a stable job in IT. So when he made this post, it felt like a slap in the face. Not only was he implying that I wasn't working hard, but he was also making it sound like he'd been this big success story while I'd been stuck struggling. I confronted him about it in a group chat with our parents, telling him that I didn't appreciate being tagged in his post and being made to look like I was lazy or not trying. Jake immediately responded with something like, "Well, Maybe if you put in the work, you'd get there too. This didn't sit well with me. I told him he was being disrespectful, and then things escalated. Jake accused me of trying to drag him down and sabotage his happiness because I couldn't handle his success. My parents, as usual, took his side and said I was being overly sensitive. This turned into a full-blown argument, with me telling Jake that I was tired of his smug attitude and that I didn't want to engage in any of this nonsense anymore. I said I wouldn't support him or his inflated ego if it meant putting down my hard work to make him feel better. After that, I stopped responding to his messages. I also decided not to attend a family gathering a few weeks later because I knew it would just turn into more of the same. Since then, I haven't spoken to Jake much, and he's been posting more about his success, including more passive-aggressive comments aimed at me. Our parents have reached out to me, asking me to make up with him, saying I'm being stubborn. They want me to apologize for not supporting Jake's big breakthrough. I've been feeling really conflicted because part of me wants to just let it go and get the family to stop nagging me, but another part of me feels like if I give in, I'm letting Jake get away with being disrespectful. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother after he lied about me and belittled my achievements? AITA for refusing to lend my friend my car after she crashed it and didn't offer to pay for repairs? So, this has been bothering me for a while, and I'm really torn about whether I handled this situation in the wrong way or not. I, 28F, have a close friend, Sarah, 29F, who has been a part of my life for the past 5 years. We met in college, and over time, we became really close. We hang out all the time, and she's one of those friends who is there for you through thick and thin. Or at least, I thought she was. A little over a month ago, I found myself in a situation where I was going to be out of town for a few days for work. I drive a used but well-maintained 2015 Honda Civic. It's a car that I rely on heavily, and though it's not brand new, I take really good care of it. I've had it for about 3 years, and it's been reliable. I know this is going to sound kind of ridiculous, but my car is also the only thing that really feels like mine in a world where I don't own a house or any other significant assets yet. Before I left, Sarah reached out to me and asked if she could borrow my car while I was away. Her car had broken down, and she was in the middle of trying to figure out what to do about it. She said her mechanic quoted her some insane price for repairs, and she was feeling overwhelmed. I could tell she was stressed out, and since we've been close for years, I felt bad for her. I also figured, why not? I'm going to be gone for a few days, and it'll be nice for her to have a car for the time being. I told her she could borrow my car, but I made it clear that I wanted her to be extra careful with it. I mentioned that I'd recently had some work done on the brakes and tires, and I wanted her to take care of it and be mindful of how she drove. She assured me that she would be careful and take good care of it, which I believed because she's always seemed responsible about these kinds of things. Fast forward a few days. I'm in my hotel room out of state, and I get a call from Sarah. I immediately knew something was off because she sounded panicked. She told me that she'd gotten into an accident while driving my car. She said it wasn't a major accident, but she had hit a curb and damaged the front bumper. She was apologetic, saying she didn't mean to do it, and that she was just trying to park when it happened. I asked her if she was okay, and thankfully, she wasn't injured. But when she mentioned the damage to my car, I started feeling anxious. I asked her how bad it was, and she said the bumper was hanging off, but the car still ran fine. She told me she'd take it to a mechanic to get an estimate for repairs. I thought she was going to get the car fixed and pay for the repairs herself, as she was the one who caused the damage. The next day, I get a call from her again, and this time, she tells me that she didn't have the money to fix the car. She claimed that the repair costs were too high, and that she was going to have to wait a little while before she could pay for it. At this point, I was really frustrated. She had borrowed my car, wrecked it, and now she was telling me that she couldn't even offer to pay for the damage. I don't know if it's just me being overly attached to my car, but I was really upset. I've never been in a situation where I had to rely on someone else for something as important as this. I felt like I had done a huge favor by letting her borrow my car, and now I was the one stuck dealing with the consequences. I asked her if she could at least help cover part of the cost or find a way to make things right, but she kept saying that she just didn't have the money. I told her that I couldn't just let it go, and that she needed to take responsibility for what happened. I didn't want to make her feel bad, but I told her that if she couldn't pay for the repairs, I was going to have to ask her for the full amount of money to fix it, and that I wouldn't be lending her my car again in the future. She didn't take it well. She said that I was being unreasonable and that I should have been more understanding of her situation. I ended up getting the car repaired myself, which cost me around $800. I didn't ask Sarah for any money because I didn't want to cause drama, but I've been feeling really upset and betrayed ever since. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting, but it feels like she took advantage of my kindness. I've been thinking about our friendship a lot recently, and I'm starting to wonder if I've been too lenient with her in the past, allowing her to get away with not being responsible for her actions. Since the accident, we've barely talked. I'm still mad at her, and she hasn't reached out to apologize for the damage or offer to pay me back. It's been weeks now, and I'm honestly not sure where we stand. A few of our mutual friends have mentioned that they think I should just let it go because it's just a car, but I feel like this is about more than just a car. It's about trust and taking responsibility for your actions. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend my car again after she crashed it and didn't offer to pay for the repairs? Or was I being too harsh in expecting her to take full responsibility for the accident? AITA for refusing to help my brother after he sabotaged my career? So here's the deal. I, 28F, have a brother, Jake, 26M. We've always had a bit of a rocky relationship, but it's been getting worse over the last few years. Growing up, I was always the one to get good grades, be responsible, and basically do everything I was supposed to do. Jake, on the other hand, was a little rebellious and got into trouble more often than not. He's smart, but he never really applied himself, and as a result, he kind of bounced around from job to job, never really finding his footing. Fast forward to a few years ago, and I was offered a great job at a marketing firm that I had worked my butt off to get. It was my dream job, and I was so excited. At the time, Jake was living at home and unemployed after quitting a job that he'd had for less than 6 months. I hadn't seen him struggle like this before, and I felt bad for him. We were living in a small town, and it seemed like there weren't a lot of opportunities for someone like him to get ahead. So, being the good sister that I am, I decided to help him. I told him I could put in a good word for him in my company. It wasn't a guarantee, but I knew they were hiring for an entry-level position that I thought he could at least try for. I did everything I could to help him prep for the interview, gave him advice on his resume, and basically told him what to expect. Well, he didn't get the job. I was bummed for him, but not surprised, honestly. His interview was a mess. He wasn't prepared, and I could tell he wasn't really taking it seriously. After that, I didn't push it. I still supported him in other ways, but I couldn't help him much more with his career. Over the next year or so, I continued to grow in my job, eventually getting promoted to a position I really wanted. Everything was looking great for me, until the nightmare happened. One day, I get an email from HR in my company. They say they need to meet with me about something important. I immediately get this sinking feeling in my stomach, and my mind starts racing. Long story short, I find out that someone has been impersonating me at work. Yes, you read that right. Someone was pretending to be me. Turns out, Jake had created a fake email account that was nearly identical to mine. He had been emailing people in my company, pretending to be me, asking for confidential information, and even making minor changes to project files. He didn't steal anything significant, but it was enough to cause confusion. My boss was furious. HR had to investigate, and needless to say, I was horrified. At first, I didn't believe it. I kept trying to make sense of how something like this could happen. But after speaking with HR and looking at the evidence, it became clear Jake had done it. When I confronted him, he admitted it without any remorse. He claimed that he was trying to help me by getting ahead at work. He thought by pretending to be me, he could get the promotions or the recognition I had earned. He even said that he'd been using my name on emails to secure opportunities for himself, thinking no one would notice. I was absolutely livid. I couldn't understand how he thought this would help anyone, let alone himself. It didn't make sense. To be clear, I had no idea that he'd been doing this. The thought of him sabotaging my career was enough to make me question everything. To make matters worse, when I told my parents what had happened, they just brushed it off. They said I should forgive him because he's your brother, and he made a mistake. My dad even went as far as to say, well, At least he didn't do anything that ruined your career entirely. I was so angry at everyone. I felt like I was being gaslit. I had worked so hard for everything I had, and here my brother was throwing it all away because of his jealousy and stupidity. My career, my reputation, it was all at risk because of him. I told Jake that I didn't want anything to do with him. I refused to help him anymore. I made it clear that I didn't trust him and that I couldn't believe he would do something like that. But here's where I might be in the wrong. My parents, especially my mom, keep telling me that I'm being too harsh. They think I should give him another chance because he's family and he was just trying to make things right. Honestly, I don't see how I can ever trust him again. I don't want to have a relationship with someone who's willing to destroy what I've worked for, all because he couldn't be bothered to put in the effort himself. He never apologized properly, either. When I asked him why he did it, he said he didn't think it would go that far. He didn't seem to grasp the severity of what he had done, and I don't know if I can ever forgive him for this. So, now I'm stuck in a situation where I don't know if I'm being too harsh or if I'm justified in cutting him out of my life for good. He's been calling and texting, asking if I'll forgive him and let him move on, but I just can't get over what he did. Am I the asshole for refusing to help my brother after he sabotaged my career? Edit. To answer a few questions. 1. Why didn't I report to the police? Well, HR decided that the company wouldn't press charges since no actual financial harm was done, but they did suspend Jake's application for future positions at the company. My main focus was trying to salvage my reputation at work, so I didn't pursue any legal action. 2. Am I cutting him off entirely? Yes, I am. I've told my parents that I don't want to have any relationship with Jake unless he takes full responsibility for his actions and truly apologizes, but I don't think he's going to do that. 3. Why didn't I just try to help him more if I knew he was struggling? I did try. I offer help in every way I could. But at some point, he has to take responsibility for his own actions and stop blaming everyone else. AITA for refusing to help my brother pay for his kids' college tuition. I, 29M, have a brother, Jason, 35M, who has been in a bit of a rough spot financially for a few years. I'll give a bit of context to explain why. Jason and his wife, Emily, 34F, both work full-time jobs, but they also have 3 kids. Their youngest, Olivia, is only 3, but their older kids, Ben, 12, and Mia, 10, are now getting to the age where their future education is starting to be a bigger financial concern. The issue is Jason and Emily live pretty far beyond their means. They have a big house. Both of them drive fairly expensive cars, and they've taken several vacations in the past few years despite not really having the income to support it. Emily's family is well off, so they've helped them out financially on occasion, but Jason has always been too proud to ask for help from anyone except me. I come from a middle-class family. My parents are fairly financially stable, and I have a good job in tech that pays well. I'm not rich, but I make a comfortable living. I don't have kids, I'm single, and I try to keep my expenses reasonable. I've always been able to save a good portion of my income and plan ahead for the future. Now, about 6 months ago, Jason came to me and told me that he and Emily were having trouble paying for their kids' education. The kids were still young, but Jason wanted to start setting money aside for their future college tuition. He said he was worried that they wouldn't be able to afford it, and he needed my help. At first, I was hesitant, but told him I'd help if he had a solid plan in place. He assured me that he was just planning ahead, and it was no big deal. He just wanted to make sure he was prepared for the future. The thing is, as I started looking into it, I realized that they were going to need a lot more than what I could realistically give them, and I started to question if it was the right thing to do. I knew that their financial situation wasn't the best, but when I took a closer look, it became clear that they weren't exactly living within their means. They had credit card debt, they were paying for a big mortgage they couldn't really afford, and they even had a couple of personal loans they were juggling. I knew Jason's salary wasn't huge, and Emily worked part-time, so it was no surprise they were struggling. But here's the problem. I don't want to enable their bad spending habits. I feel like if I give them money to pay for their kids' college tuition, they'll just continue down the same path without changing anything. They'll keep living beyond their means, relying on others to bail them out when things get tight. I don't want to be the one to put a Band-Aid on a larger issue, and I've told Jason that before. So, when Jason asked me for a large sum of money to help with the kids' tuition savings, I told him no. I explained that I didn't think it would be responsible for me to just hand over a chunk of money when I knew they weren't budgeting properly. I also told him that I would be happy to help them come up with a plan to get their finances on track, but I wasn't just going to hand them money and let them continue living irresponsibly. Jason didn't take this well. He got upset and accused me of being selfish. He said I was only looking out for myself and didn't care about my niece's and nephew's future. He argued that I had the money to help, and it wasn't like I was going to miss it. He also pointed out that I helped other people in the family in the past, so why was I being so cold toward him? He said I was being a bad brother, and that really stung. My parents got involved after Jason vented to them. They sided with him, saying I should help out because family is supposed to support each other. They said that I was being too harsh and that helping him with the tuition would be a good investment in the kid's future. They also reminded me that Jason had helped me out in the past when I was in a tough spot, and that this was my chance to return the favor. I get where they're coming from, but I still don't feel right about just handing over money. Jason's financial issues go beyond not being able to pay for tuition. They're a symptom of bigger problems, like not budgeting properly and living beyond his means. I don't think a big financial gift will actually solve the real issue, and I don't want to be the one to enable that kind of behavior. It's been a few weeks, and things are still tense between me and my brother. We've barely spoken since that conversation, and it's weighing on me. I feel like I'm being the responsible one, but I also don't want to be seen as the villain in this situation. My parents and Jason are still upset with me, and I'm not sure if I made the right call. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother pay for his kids' college tuition? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after her husband cheated on her. So, this is a bit of a complicated situation, and I'm trying to figure out if I've done something wrong or if my sister is overreacting. I'm hoping some outside perspective might help me see things clearly. Here's some background. I, 29F, have a pretty small but cozy 2-bedroom house. I've lived here on my own for a few years now, and I don't have roommates or anyone living with me. It's my sanctuary, and while I do love hosting family and friends from time to time, it's just me. My sister, Becca, 32F, and I have always had a good relationship, but we're not super close. She's married to her husband, Dan, 33M, and they've been together for 8 years. They've had their ups and downs, but I've always been supportive of her, even though we've never been as close as some sisters are. We see each other at family gatherings, and we chat now and then, but we've had our own lives. A few months ago, Becca found out that Dan had been cheating on her for about a year. To make matters worse, she found out when he accidentally left his phone unlocked and she saw explicit messages from his mistress. To say she was devastated is an understatement. Becca confronted Dan, and he admitted everything. He apologized, but honestly, his apology felt half-hearted to me. They've had a lot of arguments since, and Becca has been really torn about what to do. Here's where I get involved. Becca was absolutely crushed by the situation, and she started reaching out to me for support. At first, I was there for her. I listened, comforted her, and even tried to give her advice. I told her that no one could tell her what to do, but I encouraged her to think about whether she could forgive Dan and if she wanted to stay in a relationship that had broken so fundamentally. Eventually, Becca decided she wanted to separate from Dan. I wasn't surprised. She was heartbroken, but she knew it wasn't healthy for her to stay. She moved out of their shared apartment and started looking for a new place to stay. A few weeks ago, Becca reached out to me with a big favor. She said she didn't want to be alone right now and needed somewhere to stay temporarily while she figured things out. She asked if she could move in with me for a little while. Now, here's where I'm torn. I love my sister, and I obviously want to support her, but I'm not sure if I'm being unreasonable. I'm not used to having people live with me, and I cherish my space and independence. Also, I've never really enjoyed living with someone long-term. Growing up, we shared a room for years, and I was always the one who needed my own space to recharge. It's not that I don't want to help my sister, but living together could be hard for both of us. I told Becca that I needed time to think about it. I was torn between wanting to support her and the overwhelming feeling of dread at the thought of having her in my space. I didn't want to make her feel rejected or unsupported, but I also didn't want to feel overwhelmed or trapped in my own home. After a couple of days, I told her I couldn't let her move in. I explained that while I loved her and would be there for her in other ways, I just didn't think it was a good idea for either of us. I told her I didn't think I'd be able to handle having someone in my space 24/7, and I didn't want our relationship to be strained because of living together. Becca was absolutely furious. She said I was being selfish and that I didn't care about her when she needed me the most. She was crying, and honestly, it broke my heart. I told her I would help her in other ways, finding a place to stay, helping her move, or even just being there to talk when she needed me, but that I couldn't offer her my home. Since then, things have been really tense. Becca has been distant and hasn't really responded to my messages or calls. My family is split on this. My mom thinks I'm being too harsh and should just let Becca stay with me, while my dad thinks I'm right to protect my own space. Some of my friends think I did the right thing, but others have told me that I should have stepped up and been there for my sister no matter what. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle, and I keep second-guessing myself. I don't want to lose my sister over this, but at the same time, I feel like I have the right to maintain my boundaries and my space. I'm not saying I wouldn't help her, just that I need to help her in a way that doesn't completely sacrifice my own peace of mind. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after her husband cheated on her. AITA for refusing to give my sister a loan for her house. So, a little background. I, 28M, come from a pretty average working-class family. My parents always emphasized the importance of hard work, and while we weren't wealthy, we were able to get by. I've been lucky enough to land a well-paying job in tech right out of college, and I've been saving for a while. I've always tried to be financially responsible, and I'm now in a position where I can afford to make big investments like buying a house, which I did last year. It wasn't easy, but I'm proud of the hard work it took to get here. My sister, Emma, 26F, on the other hand, has had a bit of a different experience. She's always been more of a free spirit, and while that's worked for her in some areas of life, it hasn't been so great financially. She's worked a series of temp jobs and doesn't have a stable income, and she's been living in various apartments and renting houses, never quite settling down. She's had some financial setbacks in the past, like getting behind on rent a few times, and while she's always managed to get by, she's never really built up savings or been able to make long-term plans. A few months ago, Emma called me up and said that she was planning to buy a house. I was surprised because, to be honest, I didn't think she was in a position to make such a big purchase. I know her financial situation, and I know how difficult it is to get approved for a mortgage without a steady income or a significant down payment. She told me she had found a place she loved and was ready to make an offer. She mentioned that she was going to need a co-signer or some sort of financial help, and that's when she asked me for a loan. The loan she was asking for was around $40,000, which she said would cover her down payment and some of the closing costs. She promised me that she would pay me back as soon as she was able to. At first, I was kind of taken aback. I've always been close to Emma, but I didn't know how comfortable I felt about lending her such a large sum of money. I've always been careful with my finances, and the idea of loaning that amount of money to someone with a questionable financial track record made me nervous. I told her I would need some time to think about it. I spent a few days really considering it. I understand that homeownership is a big deal, and I didn't want to stand in the way of her dreams, but I also knew that if I loaned her the money and she couldn't pay it back, it could jeopardize my own financial future. I also thought about the strain it could put on our relationship if things went sour. So, after a lot of thought, I sat down with her and explained my concerns. I told her that while I loved her and wanted to support her, I didn't feel comfortable lending her that amount of money because of her financial instability. I offered to help her in other ways, like helping her with budgeting or offering advice on how to improve her credit score, but I said I couldn't give her the loan. She was really upset by this, and I get it. She felt like I was rejecting her and that I didn't believe in her. She accused me of being selfish and said that I was trying to make her feel like she wasn't worthy of owning a home. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her not being worthy, but about me needing to protect myself and my future as well. I suggested that she look into other options for financial assistance, like government programs or finding a co-signer who was in a better financial position. Things have been pretty tense between us ever since. Emma has stopped talking to me as much, and when she does reach out, it's often in a tone that feels like she's blaming me for her situation. She said that she feels like I'm holding her back, and that I'm judging her for not being as financially responsible as I am. My parents have also weighed in, and they've said they think I should have just given her the loan. They argue that family is supposed to help each other, and that $40,000 is a small amount compared to what I make. They also mentioned that I don't have kids or a mortgage, so I shouldn't be so worried about the money. I've tried to explain my reasoning to my parents, but they don't seem to understand. They think I'm being too rigid and that I should just trust Emma to pay me back. I've told them that I don't want to put myself in a situation where I could lose my own financial security, but they don't really get it. Now, Emma is telling everyone in the family that I'm being cold-hearted and that I'm choosing money over family. Some of my extended family members have reached out to me and said I should reconsider and just help her out. They all seem to think I'm being unreasonable, and it's starting to make me feel like maybe I made the wrong choice. So, AITA for refusing to give my sister a loan for her house. I'm genuinely trying to protect my own finances, but it feels like I'm being vilified for making that decision. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's surprise birthday party after I found out about the lies she told. So, this all started when my sister, Jill, turned 30 last week. Jill and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's the golden child of the family, successful, beautiful, and let's just say, good at making everyone think she's perfect. I'm not a jealous person, but growing up, it often felt like I couldn't do anything right in comparison. I was always in her shadow, and my parents have a tendency to reward her a little more than me, no matter how hard I tried. I never made a big deal of it. I tried to keep things cordial, but as you can imagine, the tension built over time. Flash forward to a few months ago, and Jill started talking about her 30th birthday party. I wasn't really keen on attending, mainly because I knew it would be one of those events where she's the center of attention, and it would feel like the usual look how perfect I am routine. But being the good sister, I didn't want to seem bitter, so I agreed. Jill had always been a bit over the top with birthdays. Nothing was ever low-key. She mentioned that she was planning a big surprise party for herself, and that it was going to be at a fancy venue with a lot of her friends from work and her husband's family. Fine. I wasn't thrilled, but I thought maybe this would be an opportunity to patch things up a little. A week before the party, I got a call from my mom. Apparently, Jill had asked her to reach out to me because Jill was worried I wouldn't come to her party. She wanted to make sure I was going to be there. My mom and I had a conversation about it, and she made it clear that she didn't want me to cause any issues by not attending. I agreed reluctantly, but I told my mom I wasn't going to be the life of the party or anything. I was just showing up to keep the peace. The next day, Jill reached out to me directly. She said, "Hey, I know you've got some stuff going on, but I really hope you can make it. This party is super important to me, and it would mean a lot to me if you could be there." I was honestly a little surprised that she was being so direct, but I thought, okay, maybe she's really trying to make an effort. Now, here's where things take a turn. 2 days before the party, I was chatting with our cousin, Maya, who's around our age, and she casually mentioned that she had heard Jill was inviting a few extra people to the party. I thought it was strange, but whatever. People always invite extra people last minute, so I didn't think much of it. Maya then dropped a bombshell. She told me that Jill had been going around telling people, including some of my cousins, that I wasn't invited to the party. Jill had said she didn't want me there because I would just ruin the vibe, and everyone would be uncomfortable. At first, I thought Maya was messing with me, but then she said Jill had even told people that I was a downer and that she didn't want me bringing any negativity into the celebration. I was shocked, and honestly, I felt hurt. Jill and I had had our differences, but I thought we were adults at this point. This felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't understand why she would say that about me behind my back when she was the one who had insisted I attend. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Jill had spent months planning this party, but apparently she didn't even want me there, and now she was using me as a scapegoat for whatever narrative she was trying to build. I decided to confront her directly. I texted her and said, "I heard you've been telling people that I'm not invited to your birthday party and that I'm a downer. Is that true?" I honestly wasn't expecting a response, but I wanted her to know that I knew what she was doing. Jill's reply was exactly what I expected. I don't know who's spreading rumors, but that's not what I said. You're absolutely invited to my party, and I've never said anything like that about you. She then added, but if you feel uncomfortable coming, that's totally fine. It's your choice. At that point, I felt like the whole thing was a mess. Jill had clearly lied about me, and now she was trying to make me feel guilty for not wanting to attend a party where I wasn't even welcome. I didn't respond to her text, but I was done. I couldn't believe the audacity. I'd already been prepared to attend and keep the peace, but now it felt like she was playing games with me for no reason. I decided not to go to the party. I sent a message to my mom and told her I wasn't coming because I wasn't comfortable with the way Jill had been talking about me. My mom was upset, but she understood. She tried to convince me to reconsider, but I told her I wasn't going to be treated that way. My parents had always made excuses for Jill's behavior, and this time, I wasn't going to let them convince me that I should just ignore it. The fallout has been a little intense. Jill hasn't spoken to me since, and some of our other family members have reached out to ask why I didn't come. When I explained what happened, they mostly sided with Jill, calling me petty and immature for not just showing up. Some of them even accused me of causing drama and making the situation worse. But I just couldn't bring myself to show up to a party where I wasn't respected. I get that people think I should have just sucked it up and gone, but I honestly feel like I was doing the right thing by standing up for myself. I don't want to be part of a family dynamic where I'm treated as the afterthought or scapegoat, especially when it's clear that my sister isn't interested in fixing things. So, AITA for refusing to go to my sister's birthday party after I found out she'd been talking behind my back? Was I wrong to stand up for myself instead of just showing up and pretending everything was fine? AITA for confronting my friend about stealing my ideas and passing them off as her own? I, 27M, have a close friend, Sarah, 28F, whom I've known for about 6 years. We met in college and hit it off instantly. We had a lot in common and quickly became best friends. Over the years, our bond grew stronger, and we both supported each other through tough times. I'd say that she's one of my closest friends, and I've always considered her someone I could trust. A couple of years ago, I started working on a personal project. It's a side hustle that I've been developing for the past year or so. It's a tech-related project that I'm very passionate about, and it's something I've been quietly working on with the goal of turning it into a profitable business someday. I've always kept it close to my chest because I'm protective over my ideas and didn't want anyone to steal them. I did tell Sarah about it early on, and she was really excited about the project, offering me her support. At the time, I was really happy to have someone in my corner and someone who understood the hard work I was putting into it. Sarah even said she would help me if I needed anything, like bouncing ideas off of her or just having a sounding board. I was grateful for her enthusiasm and willingness to help. Over the past few months, however, I've started noticing some strange behavior from her. I'd be working on something and mention it casually, and the next thing I know, she's bringing up a very similar idea or project of her own. At first, I brushed it off as coincidence. We both work in similar industries, so it didn't seem too strange that we might have similar ideas. But over time, I realized that some of the things she was talking about were almost identical to things I'd shared with her in confidence. For example, one day, I mentioned a specific feature I was working on for my project, something I thought was unique and innovative. I told her it was going to be a game changer for the market I was targeting. A week later, Sarah was talking about how she had this great new idea that was strikingly similar to what I had told her. She even mentioned using the same exact approach and language I'd used, but it was clear she was presenting it as her own idea. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I was just overthinking things. But then it started happening more frequently. I'd share my thoughts or frustrations about my project, and within a few days, she'd come up with something similar, often framing it as something she had been working on for a while or had just thought of. One day, she even pitched the same feature I had mentioned as part of a business idea to another group of friends, claiming it was hers. I started to feel like I was losing control of my own ideas. The final straw came last week. I had been working on a branding concept for my project, which I was really excited about. I spent a lot of time thinking through the design, messaging, and visuals. It wasn't perfect, but it was something I felt strongly about. I shared the concept with Sarah, explaining how much time I had put into it and how important it was to me. A few days later, she shared an almost identical branding concept with me, presenting it as if it was her idea. She even used the same exact font and colors I had chosen, without any acknowledgement that I had shared my concept with her. I was furious. I confronted her about it. I told her that it felt like she was stealing my ideas and passing them off as her own. I explained that I had shared these things with her in confidence, and it hurt to see her take credit for them. She was taken aback and insisted that she hadn't done anything wrong. She claimed she had been inspired by our conversations and that it wasn't a big deal. She said that we were friends and that sharing ideas was what friends did. She also mentioned that she was struggling with her own project and felt like she needed something to jumpstart her creativity. I was upset and told her that it wasn't just about creativity, it was about respect. I worked hard on these ideas and they were mine. I wasn't asking for credit, but I didn't appreciate her presenting them as her own. She didn't seem to understand where I was coming from, and we ended up in a huge argument. She accused me of being too possessive and said I was blowing things out of proportion. We haven't spoken much since then. Some of our mutual friends have sided with her, saying that I was too harsh and that I should have been more understanding. Others, however, think I have a point and that she crossed a line. I'm still upset and feel betrayed, but I'm unsure whether I handled the situation the best way. I value my friendship with Sarah, but I also value my work and my ideas. So, AITA for confronting her about stealing my ideas, or should I have been more understanding? AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend stay at my house after she treated my dog poorly? So here's the deal. I, 29F, live alone in a small apartment with my dog. Max is a 4-year-old golden retriever, and he's the sweetest dog. He's very well behaved, but he's also a big, friendly dog who loves attention from anyone who's willing to give it. I adopted him a couple of years ago, and he's been my little companion ever since. My family knows how much he means to me, especially my older brother, 31M, Ben. Now, Ben has been dating this woman, Lucy, 27F, for a little over a year. I met her a few times, and honestly, I've always found her a bit cold. She's very pretty, but she's kind of dismissive and never seems particularly interested in getting to know me or Max. I always just thought she was a little distant and maybe a bit shy. I wasn't crazy about her, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause drama. Ben seemed happy, and that's what mattered most. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. Ben called me up and asked if Lucy could stay at my place for a weekend because they were having some issues at her apartment. Apparently, her roommate was moving out, and the place was a mess, so she needed somewhere to crash for a few days. I'm always down to help family, and I agreed without thinking too much about it. The first day she arrived, I noticed immediately that she was uncomfortable. She didn't greet Max, and she seemed to avoid him altogether. I thought maybe she was just tired or not in the mood for dog interaction, but I figured she'd warm up eventually. I didn't want to push her, so I gave her space. However, things started getting weird pretty quickly. Over the next couple of days, Lucy started making little comments about Max. She called him too big and loud when he would bark at something outside, which, to be fair, he does occasionally, but it's nothing outrageous. She also seemed bothered by the fact that he followed me around a lot, which, honestly, he's a dog. He likes to be around people he trusts. I tried to laugh it off, but it was getting uncomfortable. Then, on the third day, things really went downhill. I came home from work to find Max cowering in his bed in the corner of the living room. I asked Lucy if everything was okay, and she just shrugged and said he had been acting weird. I assumed he might have gotten scared of something, so I tried to pet him, but he was clearly stressed out, which was not like him at all. Later that night, I found out why. I was in the kitchen when I overheard Lucy talking to Ben. She was saying something along the lines of, "I don't know why she has to have that dog. He's so annoying. I can't believe she lets him do whatever he wants. He should be trained better." Ben responded with something like, "Well, you know she's really attached to him, and he's a good dog." But Lucy kept going, saying how she couldn't understand how I could live with such a messy, loud animal. At this point, I felt really upset, but I didn't confront her immediately because I didn't want to make things awkward. Instead, I decided to take Max for a walk to clear my head. When I came back, I noticed that Max was acting even more skittish than before. He wouldn't come near me, and he wouldn't eat his dinner, which is super unusual for him. I was starting to get really concerned, so I went to check his collar, thinking maybe it was too tight or uncomfortable. When I did, I found something that made my blood boil. Max's collar was half loosened, as though someone had deliberately tried to take it off. It was clear to me that Max had been stressed out in the past couple of days, and it all seemed to be tied to Lucy's presence. I'll admit, I was furious. I didn't know for sure if she had done something to him directly, but I was pretty certain that something wasn't right. I decided to bring it up with her. When I asked her about it, she played it off like it was no big deal, saying that Max was just too much for her and that she wasn't a fan of dogs in general. I told her that she could have told me if she wasn't comfortable with him instead of letting him feel so unwelcome in his own home. This is where things got tricky. She started getting defensive, saying that she didn't think I was taking her feelings into account and that it wasn't fair for me to expect her to just deal with a dog while she was staying in my house. I pointed out that she had been rude about Max the entire time and that I wasn't comfortable having someone in my space who didn't respect my dog. Ben overheard this conversation and jumped in, tried to mediate, but honestly, he didn't really take my side. He said that Lucy had a point, that Max was a bit much sometimes, and that I should maybe be more understanding of her position. This really pissed me off, and I told him that if he was going to let his girlfriend talk down on my dog like that, then she could leave. I told her she could either apologize or pack up her things and go. Ben got upset and said I was overreacting, but I stuck to my guns. I told him if he wanted to defend her behavior, then he could leave too. In the end, Lucy left that night, and Ben stayed at her place. I didn't speak to either of them for the rest of the weekend. When I talked to my mom about what happened, she said I should have been more accommodating to Lucy's discomfort with Max, but I feel like I have every right to protect my dog and set boundaries when someone treats him badly. Max is my family, and I don't feel like I should have to choose between him and someone who's supposed to be family. So now I'm wondering, AITA for asking Lucy to leave my house because of how she treated Max? I feel like I might have gone too far, but at the same time, my dog is my priority. AITA for telling my friend I don't want to be in their life anymore after they constantly guilt-trip me. I, 27M, have a friend, Dave, 28M, who has been in my life for almost a decade. We met in college, and we've been through a lot together, shared an apartment for a while, dealt with heartbreaks, and celebrated a lot of personal milestones. But lately, I've been feeling like this friendship is becoming more of a burden than a source of support. I'm genuinely conflicted about what to do, and I'm hoping to get some perspective here. For context, Dave is the type of person who has always been needy, for lack of a better term. Not in a malicious way, but just always seeking validation, reassurance, and attention. For most of our friendship, I've been okay with it because he's a good person deep down, and I understood that he struggled with self-esteem issues. But over the years, it's become draining. The tipping point came a few months ago when we were out for drinks at a bar, and he started talking about his career. Dave works in a fairly competitive field, and although he's competent, he's never really had the breakthrough that he wants. At some point during the conversation, he mentioned how I'm doing so much better than him. He brought up how I have a stable job, a comfortable apartment, and a decent social circle. He said he feels like he'll never catch up to me and how he's falling behind in life. I tried to reassure him, telling him that his journey is just different and that success isn't a race. I suggested he talk to someone about his struggles or maybe even try therapy, but he brushed it off and changed the subject. A few weeks later, he reached out to me again, this time via text, saying that he was feeling depressed and that he needed someone to talk to. I've always been there for him when he's had these episodes, so I agreed to meet up. When we got together, he started talking about his feelings of failure again, but this time it felt like he was guilt-tripping me for having it all while he had nothing. He said things like, "I don't know how you do it. I just feel like I'm constantly failing, and you seem to have everything figured out, and it's hard to keep seeing you doing well when I feel stuck." At that moment, I started feeling frustrated. I'm all for being a supportive friend, but it felt like he was projecting his own issues onto me in a way that was making me feel guilty for my own success. I told him that it wasn't my responsibility to fix his life and that he needed to take more ownership of his own path. I reminded him that I had worked hard to get where I am, and that success doesn't come easily for anyone. It was a tough conversation, but I thought it would help him realize that he needed to take action instead of wallowing in self-pity. Fast forward to a few weeks later, and he started reaching out more frequently, with similar complaints and guilt trips. He'd text me late at night, saying things like, "I just don't get how you're so happy while I'm struggling," or "I don't know how to make my life better, and it's hard seeing you do well." He even went so far as to suggest that my perfect life was making him feel worse about himself. At this point, I was getting really fed up. I tried to be patient, but it was becoming too much. It felt like he was trying to make me responsible for his happiness, and every conversation turned into him blaming me for his situation. A couple weeks ago, I snapped. I texted him and told him that I couldn't keep being a part of his life if he kept guilt-tripping me. I said that I loved him as a friend, but I couldn't be the emotional punching bag he seemed to want me to be. I told him that if he couldn't stop comparing himself to me and blaming me for his own shortcomings, then I wasn't sure our friendship was healthy anymore. I let him know that he needed to take responsibility for his own happiness and work on himself instead of constantly relying on me for validation. I also told him that if he wanted to get better, he might need professional help rather than leaning on me every time things got tough. He didn't take it well. He immediately called me, and we had a long, heated conversation. He accused me of being selfish and said that I was abandoning him when he needed me the most. He said I was being too harsh and that I didn't understand what he was going through. At one point, he even said that I was just too good for him and that I didn't understand what it's like to struggle the way he does. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to be mean, but I just couldn't keep doing this. Since then, things have been really tense. We've barely spoken, and I'm not sure if I did the right thing. I know that I've been a good friend to him, but at what point does being a good friend mean stepping back for your own mental health? He's made it clear that he feels abandoned, and I hate the idea that I hurt him, but I also feel like I've been taken advantage of emotionally. So, Reddit, AITA for cutting off a friend who constantly guilt trips me and makes me feel responsible for his emotions. I'm torn because I genuinely care about Dave, but I also know that I've reached a point where I can't continue being dragged down by his negativity. I'm tired of constantly being his emotional support without getting anything in return. My other friends say I did the right thing, but I feel guilty for abandoning him when he's struggling. At the same time, I've also realized that I can't fix him, and maybe this is the only way for him to take control of his own life. So, am I the asshole for walking away from this friendship? AITA for telling my brother he can't bring his kids to my house after they broke my expensive painting? I, 29F, live in a fairly small apartment that I've worked really hard to keep nice and clean. I don't have a lot of space, so I put a lot of thought into what furniture and decorations I bring in. One of the things I'm most proud of is an expensive painting that I purchased a few years ago. It's a large abstract piece, and I absolutely love it. It was a splurge, but it was my reward to myself after hitting a major career milestone, so it has a lot of sentimental value. I have a younger brother, 25M, who is married with 2 kids, Lily, 5, and Max, 3. To be honest, I've always had a bit of a strained relationship with my brother. We've never been close, and while I try to be supportive of his family, I don't always feel like they respect my space or boundaries. He and his wife are great people, but their kids? Well, let's just say they're a bit of a handful. My brother often asks me to babysit, but I've declined several times because I'm not really interested in spending a whole day with kids, especially kids that don't have great manners. So here's where the conflict starts. A couple of weeks ago, my brother and his family came over for a visit. They hadn't been to my apartment in a while, and I thought it would be a nice gesture to invite them over for a casual get-together. My brother didn't give me any heads up about bringing the kids, but I assumed they'd come anyway. They're still really young, so it was fine, but I didn't exactly plan for their behavior. They were running around, screaming, and touching everything. I don't mind kids being kids, but the constant noise was giving me a headache. At one point during the visit, I noticed that Lily had been quiet for a while. I found her in the living room, standing right under my painting, staring at it. I didn't think much of it first, but when I went to check on her, I realized she had smudged her dirty hand all over the bottom corner of the frame. I asked her, as calmly as I could, if she had touched my painting. She looked at me, then at the painting, then back at me and said, "Oops." I was horrified. I immediately went over to inspect the damage. Thankfully, it wasn't ruined, but there were noticeable fingerprints on the glass, and I was concerned that the oils from her hands might cause long-term damage to the painting itself. I didn't want to overreact in front of my brother, but I was really upset. I told Lily, very firmly, that she couldn't touch the painting, and I gently wiped the glass. My brother overheard this and came into the living room, laughing, thinking I was just being dramatic. He told me not to worry about it, that it was just a little mess, and kids are messy. That didn't sit well with me. I've spent a lot of time and effort making my apartment nice, and my painting is one of the few things I truly value. I told my brother that it wasn't just a little mess, and that he needed to keep his kids from touching things that didn't belong to them. He gave me a weird look, but didn't say anything else. The rest of the visit was uncomfortable. My brother's kids continued to run around, knocking things over and just generally being chaotic. At one point, Lily even tried to open one of my kitchen drawers without asking, and I had to step in again to stop her. I felt like I was constantly putting out fires, and it really wore me down. A couple of days later, I got a message from my brother asking if I was free the following weekend for another visit. I told him that I didn't want them to come over anymore. I explained that his kids had already caused some damage to my belongings, and I was worried it would happen again. I also told him that I wasn't comfortable with the level of noise and chaos that comes with their visits. My brother was upset. He said that I was being unreasonable and that it was just kids being kids. He also said that I should be more understanding given that he and his wife don't have a lot of opportunities to get out of the house and that I should be a better aunt. He told me that I was being selfish, and he even brought up that I don't have kids of my own, so I wouldn't understand the stress of parenting. I tried to explain that this wasn't about me not liking his kids or not understanding what it's like to be a parent. I genuinely don't mind spending time with them, but I don't think it's too much to ask for them to respect my home and my things. I told him that if he wanted to visit again, it would be best if he left the kids at home or if we could meet somewhere neutral, like a park or a coffee shop, where they could play and I wouldn't have to worry about my things getting ruined. He didn't take it well. Now, my parents are getting involved, and they're telling me that I'm being too hard on my brother and his family. They said that family should come first, and I need to be more accommodating. They've even said that I should just let things go and not make such a big deal about a little mess. My brother keeps pushing me to change my mind, and now I'm feeling a little bit guilty. I don't want to ruin my relationship with my family, but at the same time, I feel like my boundaries are being completely disregarded. So, AITA for telling my brother he can't bring his kids to my house anymore. AITA for cutting off my brother after he sold my car without telling me. I, 28M, have an older brother, James, 32M, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. Growing up, we were pretty close, but as we got older, things started to shift. James has always been a bit of a free spirit, someone who doesn't really think through his actions. He's the type of person who lives in the moment. And while that can be fun, it's caused a lot of problems in his life, from bouncing between jobs to making reckless financial decisions. I've always been the more responsible one, with a steady job, a budget, and a clear plan for the future. A few months ago, I bought a used car, a 2015 Subaru Impreza, which I had saved up for over the course of a year. It was something I'd wanted for a while because it was reliable and had decent gas mileage for my long commute to work. I was pretty proud of it. I didn't get a new car, but I didn't care. The Subaru was exactly what I needed. I also don't make big purchases like that often, so I was really careful in choosing it. It was mine, and I was excited to take care of it. James has always had trouble keeping his finances in order, and it's been a source of frustration for both my parents and me. He's constantly asking for money or borrowing things without returning them. I've lent him money before, but it's never gone well. He rarely pays me back, and when he does, it's months later, usually with an excuse. My parents have covered for him numerous times, bailing him out when he falls into debt or needs money for rent. They've always said that James just has a hard time managing things, but it's felt like he gets away with everything, and I'm the one who's always stuck being the responsible sibling. About a month ago, James called me up and asked if he could borrow my car for a weekend trip. He said he was going on a camping trip with some friends and that his car was in the shop, so he needed a reliable ride. I hesitated because I really loved my car and hadn't let anyone borrow it before, but I felt guilty saying no. He promised me he'd take care of it and that he'd return it by Monday. He seemed genuinely excited about the trip, and I wanted to be supportive, so I agreed. The weekend passed, and Monday came around. I texted James asking when he'd be back with the car. He responded that he was running late, but would be home by the evening. The day dragged on, and I didn't hear anything else. By Tuesday, I started getting a little concerned. I texted him again, and this time he said he was just a little busy and would bring it back the next day. At this point, I was getting annoyed. It wasn't like him to be so vague, and I felt like he was dodging me. Finally, on Wednesday, I called him, and he answered sounding completely out of breath and a little stressed. I asked where the car was, and he said, "So, about that, I sold the car." I was floored. I had to ask him to repeat himself because I didn't understand what he meant. He said that he was in a tight spot financially and that he had sold my car to someone who was willing to pay more than I had paid for it. According to him, it was a good deal and couldn't pass it up. I was beyond furious. I immediately demanded that he return the money or get my car back. He said that the buyer had already driven off with it, and there was nothing he could do. I asked how he could do that without even asking me, and he just kept repeating that he was in a rough spot and needed the cash for some debts. At that moment, I completely lost it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My car was gone, and he had sold it without telling me or even asking. It was my property, and I had trusted him with it. I told him that he had crossed a line and that I couldn't believe he'd do something so reckless and selfish. He apologized, of course, but it felt hollow. He claimed he wasn't trying to screw me over. He just saw an opportunity and took it because he thought it would help him out. He also said he would give me the money from the sale when he could, but I knew better than to trust him on that. I was so angry that I didn't know how to process it. I told him I never wanted to see him again, at least not until he could prove he was responsible enough to fix this. I hung up, and after cooling down, I sent him a text saying that I didn't want anything to do with him anymore until he could make it right. Now, it's been a few weeks, and James has tried to contact me several times, apologizing and saying that he was in a bad place. He keeps saying he didn't mean for it to go this far, and that he'll figure out how to repay me. He even mentioned that he started looking for a new car for me to replace the one he sold, but I'm not sure how much of it I believe. My parents are on his side, of course, saying that I should let it go because James was just trying to get by, and that I'm being too harsh. They've always been more lenient with him, and they're trying to guilt-trip me into forgiving him. I'm still furious, though, and I feel completely betrayed. The idea that my brother thought he could take something of mine and sell it without my consent feels like a huge breach of trust. So, AITA for cutting him off and refusing to forgive him until he fixes this. Or am I overreacting? AITA for kicking my friend out of my house after she ate my food without asking? So, this is a bit of a mess, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how things got so out of hand. To give you some context, I, 26F, live alone in a pretty small apartment. It's not anything extravagant, but it's mine and I take a lot of pride in it. I have a few close friends, and one of them, Maya, 25F, has been a part of my life for several years. We met in college, and while we don't hang out every day, we're very close, and I've always considered her one of my best friends. About a month ago, Maya came to me in a bit of a bind. She had just broken up with her boyfriend of 2 years, and she was going through a rough time. I've always tried to be there for her, and I knew she wasn't in a good headspace. So when she asked if she could stay at my place for a few days to clear her head, I said yes without hesitation. I figured it would be no big deal. I have a guest room, and I was more than happy to help out a friend in need. The first couple of days were fine. Maya was quiet and kept to herself, spending most of her time either in the guest room or on the couch binge-watching Netflix. I didn't mind. I understood she needed time to process everything. But then, things started to get a little off. It all started with my food. I don't know what it is, but I've always been really particular about my food. I enjoy cooking, and I tend to meal prep a lot, so I always have enough for the week. I also don't buy a ton of junk food because I prefer healthier meals. Maya, on the other hand, is a bit of foodie. She likes to indulge, and she's one of those people who can eat a whole pizza by herself without batting an eye. At first, I didn't think much of it when she asked if she could have snack here and there. She'd grab a granola bar or some fruit, and that was fine. But then things escalated. One evening, I came home from work and found that half of the stir-fry I had made for dinner the night before was gone. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I figured she must have been really hungry and just didn't think to ask. I mentioned it casually to her, asking if she had eaten the leftovers, and she said yes. I told her I would have liked it if she'd asked first, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. The next day, I came home to find an entire box of pasta I had bought for the week was missing. I was a bit frustrated by this point, but decided to let it slide. Again, I casually brought it up to Maya, and she apologized, saying she'd been craving something with sauce and didn't think it would matter. She promised it wouldn't happen again, but it did. It started to feel like every time I came home, something of mine was gone. She'd finish off my snacks, take the last of my fruit, and sometimes even take entire meals from the fridge. At first, I thought maybe she was just really stressed and not thinking straight, but after a week of this, I was getting annoyed. I mentioned it to her again, and this time, I was more direct. I said that while I understood she was going through a tough time, it wasn't okay to keep taking my food without asking. She seemed genuinely sorry and promised she would stop. But then, I came home one day to find that she had eaten the last of my grocery haul. Everything from my chicken breast to my veggies, and even the frozen meals I had prepped for the week. I lost it. I was beyond frustrated. I confronted her, and she immediately got defensive, saying that it was no big deal and that she didn't think I would mind. I told her that I did mind. I explained that I had spent my hard-earned money on this food, and it was not okay to just help herself without asking. She apologized, saying that she had been really emotional and wasn't thinking clearly. I told her that while I understood she was going through a rough patch, I couldn't keep letting her take my food. It was disrespectful, and it made me feel like she wasn't valuing the space I was offering her. She promised she wouldn't do it again, and I reluctantly agreed to let her stay another week. But a few days later, I came home to find that all the snacks I had just bought were gone again. At this point, I had had enough. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just completely fed up. I called her out one last time, and she tried to justify her actions by saying that she had been stressed and wasn't thinking. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I told her that I couldn't do this anymore. I said she needed to leave. I couldn't keep putting up with her taking my food without asking, and the disrespect was too much. She tried to argue, saying she didn't think it was a big deal and that I was overreacting. I told her that I had already tried to be understanding, but at this point, it felt like she was taking advantage of my hospitality. She left my place that night, and we haven't really spoken much since. I know she's hurt, and I feel bad for kicking her out, but at the same time, I don't think I was wrong to stand up for myself. I've been getting a lot of messages from our mutual friends, with some of them saying that I did the right thing, and others saying I could have been more understanding given the circumstances. Maya's been texting me, apologizing, but I'm still upset. So, AITA for kicking my friend out after she repeatedly ate my food without asking? Should I have been more lenient considering everything she's been going through? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.